Mr. Barker, you still that same confidence you said you had when you came into the courtroom this morning in the justice system?
More than I had before.
Why is that?
Because I believe that these judges state what they think and do the things according to their own conscience. And I'm very glad I'm being tried in an American court and not in a Castro court.
How do you feel like characterized as a burglar?
Bernie.
Well, let me suggest this.
You as a burglar.
Let me comment about that. That, I think, was dirty. He's presumed to be innocent under our American system of justice, and anybody that refers to him as a burglar, a prosecutor, or indeed a candidate for public office to destroy his right to a fair and impartial trial does something in the direct violation of basic decent ethics.
Well, he was also accused of trying to subvert the democratic system. He's not a patriot. Mr. Barker,
what do you think about Mr. Barker?
Well, that's his opinion.
Whoa, is that contentious? What the hell's going on down there, Eric?
Apparently, they didn't like the sentence that he got.
What the fuck? I don't think he even went to trial yet, according to that. I mean, what was going on there?
I'm not sure. But that was after he was sentenced.
Right. Oh, I see. Right.
But he
hadn't made an appeal yet, so maybe there was still some time to appeal.
Could be, but he's very happy. He has an oddball voice.
He's an oddball guy. What do you want? I mean, this is a group of oddballs. Let's face it.
All right.
Whether they screwed up or not. I mean, what a great jacket. I'll tell you that right now. He's got like a fourth height collar with a burgundy tie. This guy knows how to dress for a Cuban out of Miami, or Cuban American, actually.
Yeah. Well, today's contestant is.
Tell him what he's won, Bob. Dude, there's so many of these guys. It could take us the rest of our lives to go through all these guys, but we've signed a solemn oath, Hunley and I, to deliver to you the entire Watergate glossary. There's posters. I found a poster yesterday. It was from 1972 from the Ann Arbor commie alternative paper, whatever the Village Voice was of Ann Arbor. It also had a John Sinclair concert coming up with John Lennon to free John Sinclair. So it was the same time as that. And they had a Watergate page with like 60 guys on it, like little boxes, Eric, which I'd love to get. It's on their website. It's actually on the Ann Arbor newspaper website. I mean, it's just brilliant. Like at the same time, putting every single person on there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to check that out. We might be able to do something with that and extract info.
Names or faces. Yeah, I mean, there's so many people involved because, and my humble opinion, what I'm starting to figure out is the revolution, the coup d'etat against Nixon, really starts percolating with the anti-war movement and the counterculture. And it from 67 to 74, when this occurs, it's just building. And then it finally, the whistle blows, the tea kettle explodes. They strip out first Spiro Agnew and then Nixon, and then Ford gets put in there, and then they get what they want, which is Jimmy Carter. Unfortunately, it's watch what you pray for, because Jimmy Carter will beget Ronald Reagan. But the amount of work and the dedication and the drama and the how much the Democrats put into this scheme. I started watching last night because you could go to PBS. PBS has, on one particular website, which I'll link on the locals page, has every hour, every minute of televised hearings ever recorded. And they have some intros by their guys from that time. McNeil and Lara make a couple of intros, and then it's just the hearings in blocks. So one of the greatest performers at the hearings, which is hard to find, the only place you can find it is on the PBS website of Watergate, and that is Pat Buchanan. And for 4.5 hours, Pat Buchanan destroys his tormentors. And we will get to Pat Buchanan, my friend, because he becomes a counterculture hero by that performance. He's literally welcomed into the White House afterwards with backslapping and everything else. And the couple of days before that, he was shunned by everyone simply because he had testified behind closed doors, and they leaked out that he was the mastermind of dirty tricks, which was a million light years from the truth. He had nothing to do with it. He was Nixon's speechwriter and, political advisor, but he had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And he flipped out that they were trying to smear him. And his opening statement, which I will post a video of Pat Buchanan going after them, is worth the price of admission to Watergate. And he becomes a hero in conservative circles. And we kind of addressed Pat. We touched on him briefly for the past couple of weeks, because what he represents is the Goldwater wing of the party. And he keeps telling Nixon that you have to deal with these people. And Nixon is much more of a pragmatist and not a conservative. He is much more of an appeaser. All of this stuff leads to bring Nixon down. The fact that he's not an ideologue like Reagan, that he's not a Goldwater conservative, that he's not anything other than a guy who's pragmatic, leads to enemies on the right and enemies on the left. And when I say enemies on the right, we're going to get to James McCord, who is clearly an enemy on the right of Richard Nixon when we get to the James McCord episode. The Barker episode, which we're dealing with now, really will show you some of the players involved in this game. And I'd like you to subscribe to the channel before I proceed. Take a little break right here.
Everybody get on that.
Go ahead. I'm just going to wait it out. Just going to wait. Not going to do a goddamn thing till you subscribe to this channel. I could wait here all day. I don't care.
Let's see. Go on the back and see if anything changes.
Just going to wait. Go ahead. I could wait all day, people. You don't want to subscribe? Fuck you. I'll sit here all day with these stories. No, anyway, I hope you do subscribe.
We got one.
I got one. Okay, it worked. I'm doing this every week. I don't care what it is. We're getting those numbers up come hell or high water. The Bernard Barker story, and I always wondered about Bernard Barker because he's got an Anglo name, but he is Latin or Latino in style and delivery and dressing and Miami and Cuban and all this other crap. It's a weird hybrid. His father is a Russian-American Jew, and he's named, his middle name is Leon. And I think, and I'm not alone in this, I think some of my other researcher friends believe, even though there's no evidence of this, that his middle name is Leon for Leon Trotsky. And he's born in March of 1917, Eric. Which is a strange time for Trotsky people, Oh,
yeah.
So that being said, he has a Cuban mother. So he is an American Cuban citizen, and he's got dual citizenship. Half of it will be stripped away in a little while. But even at the age of 16 in Cuba, he joins a counter or revolutionary group, depending on how you want to spin it. This is before Prio, before Batista. There's a president named Morales, and he's involved at the age of 16 with trying to topple Morales, of all people. So his father says, look, I can't have my kid doing this. I'm sending you to Miami to be with relatives. So we're gonna get back to him in a second, but something happens in 1941 on December 7th, and that's Pearl Harbor. And when Pearl Harbor happens, Bernard Barker becomes the first Cuban American to sign up for the war effort. And he enlists, the first Cuban American in America to Cuba or Cuban America, depending on where he was that week. In 1935, he returns to Havana to study at the University of Havana. So he's going to school, and I guess 6 years later in 41, when that happens, he enlists. Now, what does he do? He enlists, and he's sent to Houston, and he learns how to be aboard a B-17, a B-17 Superfortress, and they're patrolling the Gulf of Mexico. He learns how to become a bombardier. This is the B-17 Super Fortress made back in those days by Boeing. I don't know if they had whistleblowers or not, but that didn't seem to blow up on its own. And they had, Germans who were doing that for us. So Barker becomes a second lieutenant, which is, this is the United States Army Air Force, Eric, right? Is the pronunciation, because there is no Air Force yet.
Air Corps.
Air Corps or Air Forces. I've seen plural forces too.
U.S. Army Air Corps.
Okay, well, whatever it is, it's not the Air Force yet. So he signs up and he is trained, becomes a second lieutenant to be a bombardier. Now, everybody, if you follow what we've been doing, with different generals and different people and other pilots in this show, we have touched on the B-17 before in other war areas of the conflict of World War II. He's a bombardier, and he is now sent to London, where he's put in with the 331st First Squadron, the 8th Army Air Force, 8th Air Force, it's called, under the Army. So it's got a little vernacular twist there, but I think you get the gist of what this guy's going to do. He's going to go with his crew, and maybe there's some photos of some crews there. There's one, just give some sample of what a crew. Here's a typical example of one of the crews coming out of England, Americans that are going to bomb Germany into the Stone Age, hopefully, but maybe not so fast. So he gets into about, I want to say, 12 successful missions, and they're bombing the Ruhr, the industrial valley of the heartland of Germany. And on his 13th bad luck fucking mission, they're shot down. The 13th hard luck mission, Hunley, that they always go, and then they always say the 13th.
I got one more. I just one more, and
but then they always go 13th is the bad luck one, and indeed it was for Bernard Barker, who was shot down, and he is found in the woods, and he's imprisoned in Stalag 1 Luft. Stalag 1 Luft is Stalag Luft 1 is Air 1. This is kind of his boys there. Stalag Luft 1 is on the very north. If I read the map right, I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's a very, very northern tip of Germany. This is some of the boys here. Now, there's Luft 3, there's Luft 1, Luft 2. These are basically British, at the beginning, British Air Corps servicemen, British Air Force. And later it's shut down, they're scattered around, and it's reopened when they start to accumulate quite a few American airmen. And it's quite a few that they have in there, like 7,700 at its peak, Eric. We're in there, in and out of there. And they are, I don't know, like if you looked at the movie The Great Escape, okay, The Great Escape is The Great Escape is Stalag Luft 3. This is Stalag Luft 1. This is Luft 3, by the way, technically. But Luft 1 had their own escape commander. They had their own maps. They dug 50 different tunnels. This is a guy named Donald Pleasance over here with James Garner from the movie The Great Escape. Let me see. Raise your hands if you've ever seen with Steve McQueen on a motorcycle going into the cooler with his baseball glove and his ball. If anybody's seen that movie, please raise your hand. So Donald Pleasance will eventually go blind, as you recall from the movie, and James Garner heroically will lead him. They split up into different forms of escape. Doesn't end well for Donald Pleasance. The point of the matter is, the guy in the next bunk to Bernard Barker was the real Donald Pleasance. The actor himself was his bunkmate. I don't know if anybody's ever said that before, but
that's a new one.
I looked through the entire roster of men who were in there. There were some other famous men, but the one that stood out for me was the British actor Donald Pleasance, who was in a lot of movies, played a lot of roles, had an enormous. What's that?
I think he was in Halloween as the
yeah. Oh yeah,
psychiatrist.
Yeah. But I'm saying, and a great British stage actor from back in the day. Now he will get out and he will go back to England, and we'll get to what the rest of them do. But before that happens, they are in this camp. That's also Hogan's Heroes. If you remind that he is those are Air Corps people that are in there in Stalag 17 and Hogan's Heroes, whatever Stalag that was. But this one, what happens is they are filled up with Americans, and here come the Russians. Okay, so the commandant of the camp says, we're going to march you all on a long death march, all you prisoners. And the American prisoners tell them to screw off. We're going to fight you to the death if you try to move us out of here. Because they know the Russians are coming, Eric. This is really an interesting little part of history. There's a film called Instrument of War. A film came out in 2017, a drama. People may want to take a look at it. Covers this particular not so well covered piece of American and British history, actually, for our British friends.
I'm going to upload it to locals this evening.
Oh, cool. That's very cool. It's a 2017 film, very well done, beautifully shot, covers the particular pilot who will design a violin in there when he gets shot down inside the camp and play this violin. But it's an interesting movie, but it shows you the workings of Stalag Luft 1. Now, there's a book on Luft 1. There's a book on Luft. There's 2 books on this thing. Look, visitors came from Berlin. We couldn't stop that, Eric. people came from Berlin. They wanted to see what the hell was going on. This is 1939's Man of the Year for Time magazine. Heinrich Himmler, of course, and just examining some of the POWs in the concentration camp. So when the Russians begin to show up and they sense that the Russians are coming, there is, you might show the British aircrew, by the way, because I think they were transferred before this happened. There's a stack of British guys and Canadian guys. Show the Canadians for our Canadian friends, because there was about a shot of like 25 dressed up Canadians taking a group shot. I don't know if you got to see that one. Some of the shots of the camp, maybe. I don't know.
I've got the 2 shots of the camp, which I pulled up earlier.
Right. There's also an overhead shot, an empty shot of the camp. And then there's going to be a shot of the Russians with one of the Americans. There's a shot of the Russian, 3 Russians. That's the barracks, right. There's one with 3 Russians and an American at the point of liberation. I mean, in 1945, and that's April of 45. But before that happens, there it is. There's the photo of the Russians. But going back a couple of weeks before this, the German commandant, and I think there were 4 or 5 commandants over the course of the war, but the final commandant was going to march them on a death march, and they said, we will fight you to the death, hand to hand, right here. And the Germans thought the better of it and literally turned out the lights and left. And they said, now what do we do? So they're still inside, and now the Russians show up, and the Russians, the town, the closest town is it's spelled B-A-R-T-H. I think it's pronounced Bert in German. They didn't want them flooding into the town. Some of them did flood into the town. They went crazy. A couple of Americans were shot by the Russians. The Russians started drinking, raping, and pillaging as the Russians would do. And they had them get them back into the camp and secure it. The Americans will send B-17s, gut the insides of them, pick them up, and fly them to Le Havre in northeastern France, where they'll be repatriated and sent back to the United States. The British land their own planes and send them back to London to fly again, or whatever they did in London. I'm not really sure, but maybe some British relatives across the pond may know what happened to their uncles and in that situation. So anyway, so they begin to get repatriated back to the United States. So what does Bernard Barker do? Bernard Barker, the subject of today's show, Bernard Barker goes back to Cuba, and he gets a job, and Batista's in power. I don't know what this is, the medal?
That's a POW medal.
Oh, okay.
That he had. This is his medal.
Oh, I got you. Did everybody get that or something? Is that
that is a POW is is a military medal.
I like my candidates not to be prisoners of war, but nevertheless, the situation was that he gets a job for the national police in Cuba. National police are not good guys, but he's working as the second in command or the advisor to the chief of police. He's got a rank of sergeant. And it's almost like secret police, you know, because it's under Batista, so they got to do dastardly things. He's approached by the FBI. Now, the FBI knows him because A, he's a war hero. B, he's living in Havana. C, he's got American citizenship plus Cuban. He's the perfect guy, and the FBI later will turn him on to the CIA. So Barker is now doing undercover work for the FBI, and he is doing undercover work for the CIA. Now, the FBI work, by the way, when he was shot down, they were bombing Braunschweig, which I never liked anyway. And he did about 16 months in the concentration camp before he got out, just to set the record straight. But
POW camp, right? Not concentration, POW.
Whatever you want to call it, POW, right? It's not a concentration camp technically, yeah, but sometimes they called it that. They called it camps, POW camps, right? So his handler for the CIA, the reason I mentioned Braunschweig and I mentioned the Germans, is his handler for the CIA is a cat named Jerry Droller. And Jerry Droller, you say, well, who is Jerry Droller? He goes under the code name Frank Bender. And Frank Bender was his anglicized CIA name. And Droller will be involved when he goes to Miami with the creation of the Bay of Pigs troops, the 2506. Droller will have a guy underneath him named E. Howard Hunt, and underneath Hunt is Bernard Barker. Bernard Barker will become the assistant to E. Howard Hunt. But before that, he's working undercover for the FBI, and he's working for the CIA, and Truman's wife and daughter show up, Margaret Truman, and the guy in charge of showing them around Havana, ironically, is Bernard Barker. And he's working out of the embassy, the U.S. embassy here, and he's trying to get people expatriated or exfiltrated. Anyway, the situation on Droller is he's part of Operation Paperclip. He's an ex-Nazi who was OSS that we used in Germany and brought over to be part, again, of this Operation Paperclip. And what's his job? His job is now to Nazify and make these guys into Germanic marching soldiers out of Miami to invade Cuba for the Bay of Pigs. Everybody hated this guy. He didn't speak Spanish. He was Germanic and German, actually. And this is just a miniature example. He was involved in Operation 40. He worked with Tracy Barnes. He worked with Hunt. He worked with all these guys. But he's an obscure part of CIA folklore. And it was because he was brought over probably illegally through Operation Paperclip that you don't hear about Droller, and you may hear about Frank Bender. But the reality of it is he was in charge of Bernard Barker, which is the point I wanted to make. So Barker's code name, by the way, was Am Clatter-1. AM Clatter. AM was a prefix for a lot of Cuban stuff out of the Miami region. His was Am Clatter-1. Oddly enough, David Atlee Phillips' code name was Lawrence F. Barker. Go figure that one out. And humorously, when they're caught in the Watergate, when they're in the police van, Barker and Sturgis both give their names as exactly the same name, like Frank Hamilton. So the cop goes, "You got to get your story straight, boys. You can't have the same name," which I always found to be pretty funny because they had ID on them that was the same. So it was kind of weird. But anyway, so he loses his citizenship, American citizenship, Barker, because he has signed on with a foreign police force entity that he has signed allegiance to. And this happens. I always wondered how this happens. His passport had to be renewed, and they said, no, tough break. We're not renewing it because we found out you're down in Cuba working with the police force. So his thing goes out the window. It'll be restored like other people a little bit later. But the Bay of Pigs happens, and we'll cover that, and we have covered it. But you have 1,200 men who surrender. You have 100 killed. You have these 6, which I always found interesting. Here they are, the surrendering men, and there was quite a few of them. It was 1,200, April 15th, 1961. B-26s that they bought out of Texas. This is after the war. They bought these B-26s, and they put Cuban Air Force markings on them, and they were the first line of offense in the softening of the beachhead. Now, Kennedy famously didn't follow up on it, but they did have these B-26s. All 6 of them were shot out of the air immediately. They were shot down. They didn't have any air, ground-to-air missiles, any surface support, any support whatsoever. They didn't even have a place to land. So there was no way those B-26s were ever going to have a happy ending. After the like I said, $53 million was turned over. Bobby Kennedy raised money from the Pfizers and different drug companies to come up with baby formula and powdered milk and everything in terms of pharmaceuticals for the island. And then they extracted, and later at the last minute, at the 11th hour, extracted another close to $3 million in quote unquote reparations that he crowed quite a bit about. Castro did, of getting that out of the United States government. And they wanted this to go away. They wanted to invoke the Neutrality Act, which they did, this being the Kennedy brothers, afterwards, to prevent any of these Cuban Americans down in Miami from doing anything crazy again. However, it doesn't stop them. Barker, to his credit, opens up a real estate business in Miami as his cover and income. He gets a real estate license, and he employs Eugenio Martinez and Diego and a bunch of the other, Bay of Pigs guys who were his men. He employs them. Now, oddly enough, there was, is that Martinez?
Eugenio, yeah.
Yeah, Eugenio Martinez. There he is. Yeah, now he's going to have an episode that is going to be very interesting, Martinez. He is one of the most unheralded of the burglars in the group. And you say, well, why? I don't want to get into it now, but Eugenio Martinez was the only one that day and in the break-ins who was actually still on the payroll of the CIA and working for the CIA at the time. This is Vigilio Gonzalez, who had a lock store in Miami. He actually was a lock picker, but he also had a lock store, so he knew a key, copy key kind of store, with locks, a locksmith. He was a locksmith. I think you need a little piece of paper for that. Anyway, so it's a weird thing because when Barker gets arrested, there's a lot of chatter among the CIA as to who's going to say what, who's going to talk. And one guy named David Morales said that he has been a blabbermouth his entire life in the CIA, and Morales had called for his termination in 1962. How do you like that? David Morales, of course, was the co-operational chief of Miami for the CIA, also known as Big Indio, also linked to the assassination, was one of the top assassins for the CIA. And he claimed in an interview years later that he had requested the execution of Bernard Barker in 1962 after the Bay of Pigs because he wouldn't shut his mouth about everything, just in general. He may have had some odd sexual predilections. I won't go into that again. We covered that in the previous episode, so we don't get demonetized again. But that's a separate issue. He did have 4 wives, by the way, and a daughter that I love. This daughter should have been a movie star. There's a picture of her. Maybe Hunley could find it. She was very outspoken in defense of her father, and was on the steps of the courthouse. Yeah, there she is. Half Cuban, half, I guess, Russian in that regard. Yes. Yeah, I just want to look at these photos for a while. I'm going to take a break. So in 1962, right? It's December 29th, 1962, at the Orange Bowl in Miami. They are giving, and Barker's there, they're all there, they're giving JFK. Jackie spoke in Spanish to them beforehand, which I think there was like 40,000 people there, and said this will fly over a free Havana if my name and my head remain on my neck. And it didn't last too long. So ended up in the basement at the JFK library in Boston or something when they finally got it back. But the men from the 2506, the brigade, famously gave Kennedy that flag, their flag. And we've covered some of the plots that were going on in Miami and Tampa, right, Eric, at the time to kill the guy who's getting the flag. As to who is doing this, there's all kinds of different people running around here. So it's it's really simplistic when people start saying who did this, the CIA did that. There's so many people in and out of these organizations who are contract players, who are employees. I mean, we'll get into Hunt's lawsuit against Liberty Lobby and some of the other things that we have. But during this post 1962 situation with the failure of the Bay of Pigs and the assassination of JFK, he is being utilized, Barker that is, by Hunt to dispense cash to the former exile community or the current Miami anti-Castro Cuban community. I mean, dispense cash for dirty tricks and operations against Castro, including the assassination, Operation Mongoose. Barker is a bagman for his own cause. Now, Barker will now be called by Hunt. Actually, Hunt leaves a note on his door. He can't find him, doesn't have his phone number. He leaves a note on his door. And in Coral Gables, I think he lived. He became like I said, a real estate broker, but he had some nice digs for himself. So he left a note on his door and he said, "Is this the same? If this is the same Bernard Barker, this is Hunt here, yeah. If this is the same Bernard Barker who I worked with in 1961, please meet me at the Bay of Pigs monument." So there's a monument there, and he goes to the monument, and there is Eduardo, which is E. Howard Hunt's code name. And E. Howard Hunt is revered by the Bay of Pigs community. He's revered by the anti-Castro Cubans. He's revered by Barker. They know him as Eduardo, and he is their immediate overseer in terms of the Bay of Pigs. And so Hunt contacting him, this is after, I want to say this is like September 1971. And he asks him to join a group that he's putting together called the Plumbers Unit. And the Plumbers Unit, he explains, has the approval and oversight of the White House. And if anything, Barker is a super duper patriot. And he says, "Where do I sign?" And he says, "We've got a bunch of security leaks. We need to." There's obviously on the bottom Sturgis with him, and
the top two.
Top two, yeah, we showed this last week. The Sturgis gets involved here, but not yet. Sturgis is not in this yet. Sturgis is not asked to be in this. The first thing that Hunt tells Barker is he wants him to help him on a mission to break into a guy's safe in California. And in California, in Beverly Hills, is the Lewis Fielding, the psychiatrist of Daniel Ellsberg. And you say, well, Ellsberg's an American hero. Not to these guys. There is information from FBI reports that Hunt receives that Ellsberg has given the full copy of the Pentagon Papers to the Soviet embassy before the New York Times. He's walked into the Soviet embassy to give them that. Him and his wife are involved in massive amounts of hallucinogens. Him and his wife are going to some orgy center for some oversight with a psychiatrist where they have orgies in Beverly Hills or Venice. I'm not really sure what this place was, whether it was a nightclub or whether it was a place for the exploration of sex. This was a weird time. We don't really know what they were doing there, but from Liddy and Hunt's point of view, Ellsberg is a complete loose cannon. They don't know what he's going to do next. He's already taken this RAND report, these thousands of pages, and given it to, in their mind, to the Soviets, and in the New York Times, which is in their mind the same thing. And these guys, Barker, he asked Barker to put together a crew. So Barker gets Martinez, and he gets a guy named Diego, and not Sturgis yet, because Sturgis will come on later. But they're going to break into the safe of the psychiatrist for Daniel Ellsberg. Now you say to yourself, how much these guys getting? How much do you get for this? You know, these break-ins, right? So I looked it up. This is really interesting. Liddy, Hunt received $25,000 per break-in, Eric. Liddy got $20,000 per break-in, and McCord $15,000 per break-in.
That's good money.
No kidding, Sherlock. And I'll tell you, they were like two kids in a candy store, not McCord, but Liddy and Hunt. Both their wives said that they were terrible for each other, that they acted like teenagers because they were now banking this money and calling for more break-ins. Now you say, what about Barker? Barker and his friends turned down the money. They said, we're not taking a nickel for our country, my friend. We will do this because we're true believers. And that delineates the Cuban Americans from the rest of these Ghanafs. Liddy and Hunt are banking money hand over fist, bro. They give, McCord comes to them. McCord says, I need some equipment, right? So McCord, and he goes, how much do you need for the equipment? McCord gets from Liddy $250,000 in cash to buy walkie-talkies and transponders. $250,000 in cash, and Liddy freaks out because the walkie-talkies are right out of Mattel. None of them work. The bugs don't work. Nothing works. He brings them the walkie-talkies. There's more men than there are walkie-talkies. There's only 4 walkie-talkies and 6 men, and they're not charged. And Liddy begins to smell a rat. But he's not CIA, Liddy. He's ex-FBI. He doesn't know who these people really are. But Hunt is linked to the White House. So Hunt, stupidly, they all have his name and White House phone number. We'll get into that, how stupid the thing was or how intentional it was. We don't really know. But I just want to get back to the Ellsberg thing because it's very rarely covered about Ellsberg. The Ellsberg thing is kind of interesting because Ellsberg was honeypotted, not that he didn't like it. He had a girlfriend from Eastern Europe. He had another girlfriend, I think, from the Philippines. Indonesia. And he had one from Sweden. This is separate than his wife. This is completely separate. He's involved in all kinds of different shenanigans, and they are justified in their minds of going into this guy's safe and breaking in to see what the psychiatric reading is on Ellsberg by Lewis Fielding, the psychiatrist in Beverly Hills. Like I said, they were heavily into, it was called the Sandstone Club. Now, initially, people thought this was a nightclub, but it wasn't a nightclub. It was a psychiatric place where you explored sexuality. So Liddy and Hunt both felt that this was a perfect target for the Soviets to get people compromised through sexuality and through hallucinogens. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. They believe that this guy can be flipped and that he may have already been flipped by the Soviets. They have information, like I said, from the FBI that he has walked these documents into the embassy, the Soviet embassy. So they're looking for something other than dirty tricks out of the White House. That's not what they are involved in. They're looking for something else. Now, while they're waiting to do the Ellsberg thing, they also did the thing the week before when Hoover dies and Hunt says with Liddy, get us a bunch of strong Cubans. We're going to break some heads. And Sturgis is there. Sturgis actually does a radio interview afterwards. They get arrested by 2 Metropolitan Police who said, we need more guys like you to bust some of these hippies' heads. So the Metropolitan Police turn them loose. They're not without support. I mean, you're talking about a 68% approval rating for Richard Nixon at this time. So, I mean, this is why Watergate has to happen for the opposition. This is why Ted Kennedy is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Ted Kennedy has now been politically defanged because of what happened in an episode that we did called Chappaquiddick. But he's not defanged behind the scenes. And he begins to pull these strings. Now, to this day, we don't know who did what to who and what happened. We covered the call girl ring that was going on in the DNC. The phones that were tapped were not Larry O'Brien's phones. In fact, it turns out there were no taps on any phones. The FBI took the phones apart, and there were no taps on any of the phones in the DNC. Now, you may find that to be odd, because 3 months after the arrests, they find a tap on O'Brien's phone, Spencer's phone in the office, and it's not even a tap. It looks like somebody built it at home using a couple of transistors. It's totally a toy. It didn't work. And the FBI under Siebert issued a report. I think the guy's name was Siebert. I'll have to check that. I think it was. Or Sellert. Issued a report saying that bug was planted by Democrats after Watergate because there were no bugs on the phone. The FBI has an entire report just about the phony bug in DNC headquarters, which we'll get to in a later episode. But man, oh man, is that a smoking gun that this thing was a setup. Meanwhile, Hunt asks Barker to round up about 20 hippies in Coral Gables. And he wants the 20 hippies to strip naked at the Doral Hotel where their McGovern campaign is going to have their nomination for president. And he wants them to strip naked and to jump in the pool with signs, "We love McGovern," or whatever. And so Barker goes, "I could get you 20 hippies. I know plenty of hippies." So Barker is being used for that also. And they're looking, when they go into the White House, into the DNC, they're looking for, they also believe, and Barker believed this, that there were contributor lists. What they wanted was the list, and it's not that crazy. If you get the list of contributors to the Democratic Party, you could then check them out. And they believed that on that list were Castroites, and Soviet money also was in there. They wanted to run a check on every single donor to the DNC. That was their goal. And he believed, Barker believed, and so did Hunt, that there was money from the Cubans for McGovern in those files. Now, John Dean, on the other hand, was looking for the black book of Haiti because his wife was in it. So you've got all these different reasons for this thing to happen. McCord has his reasons, which we're going to get into. I don't want to tip the hat about McCord, but he's got his own reasons for doing this. But going back to the Ellsberg break-in, which I want to get into, because they go to the CIA, they get wigs, disguises, because the CIA immediately, Helms and everybody else afterwards, says we had nothing to do with this. They have plenty to do with this. Martinez is still on the payroll. Hunt retired for the second time the year before, quote unquote. Barker is CIA, but Martinez is actually on the payroll. So they take about 40 photos. They claim they never found the Ellsberg file. Okay. They never found the Ellsberg file. Martinez and Barker throw files all around the office. They take out some vitamins from the medicine cabinet and they throw them on the rug, on the carpet in there, and make believe it was a junkie who broke in. Okay, the police buy this. They break in. And it goes pretty well, except there's a maid there. She doesn't leave, and they have to break in with the maid and blah, blah, blah. Afterwards, they have a champagne celebration to celebrate the fact that they got absolutely nothing. that there was nothing, right, doesn't make any sense, right, they lied about it. The file itself, because he will show up, Lewis Fielding will show up the next day, and he will testify in court that the Ellsberg file was on the ground and had been fingered through and touched, and obviously there were, he could see that it was open on the floor, the actual file. So it turns out that the Martinez took all of these photos of the Ellsberg file, and they were celebrating the fact that he took photos of the Ellsberg file, even though they denied that they never found a thing in there. Barker goes to him and says, we never found a thing. This is what's on the record. Now, in reality, Liddy says, where's the film? And he says, well, we couldn't develop the film. He goes, why not? He said it was a CIA camera. It didn't open. It turns out, this is unbelievable. It turns out that they had given Martinez a Minox camera like Oswald had. The only place they could develop it, you couldn't open it and deal with it at a regular place. CIA took it back, never returned the film, never gave them to the plumbers what they found, and the whole thing disappeared. The whole folder, the whole file of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatric peccadillos went directly to the CIA as per the shooting of the photos by Eugenio Martinez. That's why Martinez is important, because he's a rat and he's working for the CIA, at least on the level of the Ellsberg break-in. And we're not at the Watergate break-in yet, my friends. These are earlier break-ins by the plumbers unit. So keep this in mind. This is going to get a little crazier.
Wow.
Because nobody mentions this in Watergate about the Ellsberg thing. Now, Ellsberg will famously go on to become, the Julian Assange of the 70s and 80s. I guess that's about as fair as you could say. But Liddy and Hunt took with them Barker, Martinez, and this guy Diego. Diego will be another rat who will not go with them to the Watergate complex. In between this time of the Fielding break-in to the Watergate break-in, they break into the Watergate once and they can't get in. The thing is a debacle, and they regroup and they do it again and they get caught the second time. But during the second time when they're caught, McCord, as we said, continues to disappear. Gonzalez apparently doesn't speak a word of English. So when Schaffler, the police officer, says, put your hands up, he's carrying his tool bag with all his tools in it, and he says, drop the bag. And he's just about to shoot him, and Barker says in Spanish to drop the bag. Now, Barker has his hand in his jacket pocket. Now, what is Barker trying to do with his hand in his jacket pocket? Because Schaffler sees him. Schaffler is a guy we mentioned before who's a DC intelligence cop who nobody knows why he's there, how he got wind of this thing. But he's one of the main arresting detectives at the Watergate, DC detectives. So he's about to shoot Gonzalez in the chest because he won't drop this bag. However, also, Barker has his hand in his pocket. And what is he trying to do? And Schaffler starts yelling, get your hand out of that effing pocket. Get your hand out of that pocket. And he's got guns on him. And he jumps up on top of the desk, Schaffler, with guns drawn with a .38 special. And he's got it trained on Barker. And Barker coolly and calmly takes out a notebook and says, I just have this notebook. And he says, all right, give me that notebook. Get over here. So luckily for Barker, they only had 2 sets of handcuffs. They didn't have all these handcuffs, Eric. They didn't have handcuffs enough for Barker. So what's in Barker's coat pocket? The walkie-talkie. And he famously says, when they turn their back, he puts the walkie-talkie and he says famously, they've got us. That was Bernard Barker, who told Liddy and Hunt, they've got us, who were across the way in Howard Johnson's hotel, along with Baldwin, who was listening in on the phone calls. So Barker never buckled. I mean, he was professional throughout the whole thing, never lost his cool, Barker. I mean, you got to give him credit for that. And this was a crazy scene where somebody could have got hurt very quickly. And he, had his walkie and he was clicking it. And Liddy was trying to hear what was going on. And it was Barker. He finally put his mouth to the receiver. I don't know if he bent down or pulled it out or whatever the hell he did. But he was not handcuffed. And, like I was going to tell you before, according to the wives, Liddy and Hunt's wife, now Dorothy Hunt will die in this fiery plane crash with $10,000 in her pocketbook, $10,000 in cash in Chicago. And there was a guy who was there covering it for the time named Greg Boudel. And we discussed this on his radio show a couple of weeks ago. Greg was there when the plane crashed at Midway, burning everyone to death, or not everyone, but most people, including Dorothy Hunt. The situation becomes onerous because Liddy goes back to the White House and begins shredding actual $100 bills. And nobody's looking for Liddy. Hunt is literally on the run because everybody's got Hunt's name in their address book. Everyone's got E. Howard Hunt, 202-379 White House. E. Howard Hunt, call today, don't delay. Everyone's, all the burglars have Hunt in it. And that's famously where he gets a call the next morning at his own home. His wife was in Europe for the summer with the kids. So Hunt goes home and the phone rings and says, "This is Bob Woodward from the Washington Post. Mr. Hunt, like to know why your name is in the address books of the Watergate burglars." And he believes that it's Bob Woodward, the former ambassador to Uruguay and Spain, who's his arch nemesis, who has the same name as Bob Woodward. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I didn't know anything about this. There was an ambassador who tried to undermine Hunt's career when Hunt tried to get into the embassy as a CIA operative in Uruguay and Spain. The guy who cock-blocked him was a State Department ambassador named Robert Woodward. So when Woodward calls him in the morning on Monday and says, "This is Bob Woodward from the Washington Post," he's going like, Jesus, how did this guy get a job at the Washington Post? And why is he calling me about this? Anyway, he goes on the lam, which we'll get into when I don't want to get into it too much because we're going to have a whole or two Howard Hunt episodes. But he goes on the lam and he's just going to different friends' houses. He doesn't really know where to go. He's trying to lawyer up. Liddy, no one's looking for Liddy. Liddy's just having a good old time at the White House trying to get lawyers to get out his men that are in the D.C. jail where the J6ers live now 24/7. So Liddy is doing his thing in the White House. Hunt goes up to the White House, takes all the phone eavesdropping equipment, the photography equipment, and locks it in his safe.
This is the other Bob Woodward.
No, he doesn't look anything like him, Hunley.
No, he doesn't.
I thought that was a weird coincidence. But getting back to the wives, both wives become friends, Dorothy Hunt and whoever is the wife of Liddy. I forget her name, Doris or something. They become best friends, and they complain to each other that these two guys are bad for each other because they act like teenage boys around each other. They act like teenagers, and they feed off each other's spy fun being a spy thing. Because a lot of these guys were not really involved on being professional spies. This is really, in a lot of ways, the gang that couldn't shoot straight. They really don't know what they're doing. They are undermined by these insiders who are trying to undermine the operation to begin with. And then you've got guys like Jeb Magruder and Dean who have no idea how to run a dirty tricks campaign. Pat Buchanan says to them, there used to be a guy named Tuck who was a Democratic version of Segretti, who was the Republican version of him. Tuck famously, and he testifies to this in the Watergate Committee, which is a great little story. He said Nixon was campaigning in 1962 in California, gets off the back of a campaign train, you know, one of those whistle stops, Eric. And Tuck puts on an outfit of an engineer and signals the conductor to pull the train away, leaving Nixon behind at the station. Now, that's a dirty trick. That's pretty good. That's like a prank, dirty trick kind of thing. And Buchanan uses that as an example in the hearings to explain what Nixon had signed up for, because he had been the victim of so many of these dirty tricks throughout his career and pranks that he wanted to give back a little bit to the Democrats. But the whole thing is bungled. The whole thing is bungled. I mean, Barker gets to serve a year out of a 2.5 to 6 sentence for conspiracy, burglary, et cetera, et cetera. The rest of them get about the same. Baldwin, the photographs that were supposed to be from the Watergate turned out to be given to, this is unbelievable. Hunt gives Barker the photos undeveloped, and he says, we need these developed quickly. Do you know a place? He goes, oh boy, do I know a place. Let me tell you something. I know a place in Miami. And he takes him to Rich's 1-hour photo in Miami. And Rich develops them, and he goes, oh my God, take a look at this. This is crazy. There's hands, there's gloves, there's thing says DNC on top of it. He tells the FBI. I mean, every single thing, whether it's intentionally bungled or unintentionally bungled, everything that can go wrong, intentionally or unintentionally, and we'll get into that, because a lot of people believe that all of this was intentional. Nobody could be this stupid. And I tend to be in that school. I wasn't originally, but I am now. This has been debated recently for the past 10 or 15 years in various publications that we could get into and list at a later date. But the reality of it is, the photos, when they do develop them, these crazy photos at Rich's Photo Mart in Miami, show gloved hands with the documents over a shag rug. There was no shag rug in the DNC. The photos were taken somewhere else. And this is apparently, the shag rug is in the Howard Johnson's rooms across the way. And they believe that Baldwin and McCord were involved in shooting these phony photos in the Howard Johnson's hotel, because they were not shot at the DNC. These photos, there's no shag rug there. And I mean thick shag, you know, like one of these orange thick shag rugs that they would have at a Hojo's.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Anybody have any questions so far?
You're just getting warmed up.
I'm just getting warmed up. But I mean, I just love that Liddy was shredding the $100 bills because of the consecutive serial numbers. You know, that was the craziest part of this whole story. Like, you couldn't do anything else with those $100 bills?
Apparently not. That is crazy.
What am I trying to find here? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, this Minox comes into play. And at first they said Liddy called it a camera that could not be opened. And I'm going like, what the fuck camera can? And it was a Minox. And it can be open. I mean, I have one, but there's nothing you could do with that film because there's only a couple of places you could actually develop it.
That's weird. So some equipment they got was top of the line
from the CIA itself. No. Martinez, on the payroll, the CIA was given the Minox by the CIA. He gives it back to them. There's so much more here than meets the eye. There's so much stuff going on in this story. And I believe that this was the greatest theater the Democrats ever put on. This entire package is being orchestrated. And when you get into McCord, some of it will become more obvious, because McCord is a extreme right-winger who hates Nixon's foreign policy. So he's motivated for other reasons. And then you got the whole Buchanan thing, trying to help them navigate the Watergate hearings and the Watergate stuff through Pat's also agrees to keep, and I'll just tip you on the Pat Buchanan strategy. Pat Buchanan says, keep the Dean tapes and burn the rest, and say, fuck them. Burn the rest of the tapes, but keep the Dean ones. Give them all the fucking Dean tapes you want. because he's turned against us. And at least they'll have some tapes, and you wouldn't have destroyed them all. Now, Connolly famously says, John Connolly, have a bonfire media event in the back of the Rose Garden and burn them all in public, inviting the people there from the media. So there's different points of view on how to deal with this thing, and people want to slice and dice it up. But man, oh man, is there a lot of lying? There's a lot of scheming. There's a lot of lawyering up. There's people trying to save their own lives politically, legally, jail-wise. There's a lot of stuff going on that contradicts each other. So it's taken like 50 years or more to sort through all of this bullshit around this thing. One thing I know is when the Democrats lie, they lie big. They cemented this Watergate into like first graders education. I'm exaggerating, but they have literally cemented this thing into too much. It's almost like they celebrate something too much, where it's untenable. In fact, when some of these books came out, the later books that showed the revisionism of Watergate, as documents begun to come out, these people were threatened physically, the authors. I mean, Bob Woodward denied giving an interview to one author, Jim Hogan, who wrote Spooks and a couple other books. He has an interview with him. I mean, the lengths that they go to protect this narrative seems to be the same lengths they would go to for Hunter Biden's laptop and the J6 committee. It's got the fingerprints of them all over it. And that's why it reeks. And that's why the story has to be told, because history is repeating itself again. These acts that they do in Watergate, once you peel back the onion, look incredibly similar to what's been going on in the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Even like January 6th.
Yeah. The heaviness of the pounding of the propaganda is astounding. And they did the same thing with Watergate.
And they did it well. You said they practically had it in the classroom. No, they did have it in the classroom, Mark. I was in the classroom.
It was in there?
Yeah, I was taught. Anybody who was younger was taught about Watergate and how evil, nasty, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Well, it's almost like they're drilling it into you too much to be believed. You know what I mean? It just seems too easy that this was it, cut and dry. Now, what Buchanan believes is that, if Nixon had destroyed these tapes, and he's not alone, Buchanan, other people said the same thing, his presidency would have survived and he would have gone down in history as an extremely successful president. I happen to agree with that, but my contention is that he was too much in the middle, Nixon, politically, that he was not right enough and he was not left enough. And his whole White House was infiltrated by people on the right and people on the left who were, as soon as there was trouble, they began to undermine him. It's not a workable model, is what I'm getting at. It's not a workable model. And we saw the same thing happen with Trump. He did the same thing Nixon did. So as soon as they created a dramatic trouble thing out of thin air, the people on both sides of the aisle begin to run to the sides of the aisle where they're from. Patrick Moynihan, who was his advisor, bails out. Lowell Weicker, who is a Republican, is one who turns the sword in him from the Watergate committee. All of these people who were not Nixon people begin to extract blood from Nixon and the people because they had won by the biggest landslide in American political history 2 minutes before Watergate. I mean, 49 state sweep at the time was the biggest landslide in American political history. Nixon correctly felt that he had the power to do things. Whether that was correct or not, whether he went megalo or not, whether it became an imperial presidency or not, is debatable. The reality of it is, when you win by that landslide, you believe you have a mandate, right, Eric?
You do have a mandate, really.
You do have a mandate. You do have a mandate. Yeah, you do have a mandate. He was pulling out of the war. He had those people going up against him, the American Security Council that McCord was affiliated with. You had the military-industrial complex that wanted a perpetuation of the war. You had the people on the left who were not happy. They didn't end the war. They started the war. You know, the liberal Democrats who were, you know, JFK and Lyndon Johnson's people were now turning against him as if he created the war. I mean, it's so crazy. You've got protesters, and it's starting to wind down. Why? He goes into Cambodia. He cleans out those nests in Cambodia. He goes into Laos. He cleans out the nests of communists in Laos. Saigon is really controlling most of the cities in South Vietnam. This thing is going far too well. I mean, the things that you remember of the Saigon helicopter, that's under Gerald Ford, bro. That's 1975. That's what they wanted you to see. That's what they wanted to happen, was what happened on Gerald Ford's watch. That was never going to happen on Nixon's watch. That's that helicopter falling off the roof of the American embassy. That was the
Afghanistan.
It looks exactly like Afghanistan.
Yep.
I mean, he wanted to get out. You know, Strength Through Peace was his whole operation, and to you know, wind down the war. He had ended the draft. Famously, Kissinger and Buchanan both were telling him how the anti-war movement was winding down. So the Democrats were getting nervous. That event where they're surrounding or trying to get at J. Edgar Hoover's body, you could see that the tide was turning against them, that this was beginning to go the other way. And they needed an exit strategy for themselves, because the war was their Christmas tree, Eric. That war wrapped around Nixon's legs. And like I said, there's a picture I sent you of Johnson with Nixon. I've never seen this photo before. It's in the White House elevator. It was taken in December 1968, I believe. Johnson supported Nixon privately. He said, I read the reason why last week, but Johnson completely supported Nixon's method of getting out of Vietnam. He just couldn't do it himself. Yeah, here he is, and that's in the elevator. He's giving him the Johnson treatment. How do you like that? Johnson's giving Nixon the Johnson treatment, for Christ's sakes.
Crazy. That is definitely a wild shot.
It's a great photo because of the mirror. It's done by Yamamoto. I think that was his name. It was Nixon's photographer. Maybe I take it back. I think it was LBJ's photographer. I take it back. It's December 1968, so he's still on the job.
Yeah, all these angles are great though, because
they're great. I mean, it's a man. I've never seen this photo. It's fucking. I found it yesterday in a book. It's fucking great. Oops, sorry. I got excited there with the photo. Sorry.
It's an exciting photo for sure.
It's an exciting photo for kids at home. But all right, well, that's we're going to get into some other stuff, but I just wanted to get into Barker. There's more stuff on some of these other people, but I do want to do a show on everybody because each of them deserve their own show. The guy's name was Michael Richardson, right? This is the photo store owner, and it was kind of like the laptop repair shop that Hunter Biden brought it to. He brings in this photos to be developed. And there's about 35 photos that Richardson develops. 40 to 50 shots were taken, and it's a 1 out of 4. It's called Rich's Photo in Miami. It was June 10th, 1972, and he looks at these like the guy did with the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, there's so many echoes to today. It's laughably exciting, you know. How many reverbs there are in these two stories, bro. In these two stories.
It is weird. And with Trump being influenced and admiring Nixon so much, it is definitely a reflection.
But again, Nixon, because of the landslide, feels that he's comfortable in bringing in like a Daniel Moynihan to write on a piece on African-American families. He's got liberals in there. He's got Len Garment, who's his New York lawyer, who's another liberal jazz musician, lawyer. I mean, he's surrounded by these guys. But when the shit hits the fan, they're the ones who are going to stab him in the back. And that's what happens. It really is an incredible story of a guy who trusted people too much. And he had his own foibles, obviously. I mean, he was an alcoholic. He had a lot of mental issues, Nixon. But he fought and clawed his way to the top. And whether you want to look at it or not, the China opening with Kissinger and the treaty was huge, but not if you're a Barry Goldwater Republican conservative, it's not huge. I mean, the amount of heat that he took from William F. Buckley and Goldwater and Buchanan, it was not huge. And the treaties with the Soviets were not used. Giving them grain after their drought, this drove people insane. How he gave them tons and tons of free grain. When you had them on the balls of their ass, the Soviets, they kept saying, why are you doing this? And he had no real explanation, Nixon. I mean, it's really bizarre.
Nixon was a far more progressive president than people realize.
Yeah.
Title IX, EPA.
Yeah.
Many things came out of Nixon. And there have actually been articles written about that saying Nixon was really a liberal president.
Yeah.
Or a progressive president.
Keep in mind, he comes out of California. He's not coming out of Iowa, and he's not coming out of Alabama. You know, by the way, Pat Buchanan revealed before the choice was for what's his name, Ford to be vice president, it was supposed to be John Stennis out of Mississippi. Here's Buchanan. He really climbs the national stage and becomes a star from those Watergate hearings. Over the course of the thing, it didn't amount to a hill of beans, but for a moment in time, he gave as good as he got. They couldn't lay a glove on him. I mean, he destroys Sam Dash. He really destroys him.
Well, he's a smart dude. He's the
original
conservative.
Even when I was on the left, I would watch Buchanan and Buckley in awe. You know what I mean? But you had to respect these guys. I mean, they're intelligent. I mean, Buckley, of course, everyone knows that. But Buchanan comes out of that Buckley camp. They're like best friends. By the way, Buckley and Hunt will be linked together, as we will see when we get to the Hunt episode. Interestingly enough, is the godfather of his children. So,
yeah, I think you mentioned that before.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. And in fact, in Hunt's book, one of the books, the foreword is written by William F. Buckley. They're very close.
Yeah, the public intellectuals, though, that's like something that Tucker strived to be. Tucker Carlson. I mean, Tucker's brother is Buckley.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a coincidence that Richard named as.
Well, it's just interesting to me that it seems to be a combination of the gang that couldn't shoot straight, combined with dirty tricks and to put it in a nutshell, they tried, and this is where it's going for me. They tried to create their own CIA, miniature CIA, and their own miniature FBI. This had never been done before. So when they create the plumbers union, the CIA goes, "What the fuck are they doing? What is this?" And they just undermine them. And the FBI, obviously with Mark Felt, because Hoover is now dead, he does the same thing. So it's almost like they've created two mega enemies by creating this plumbers unit. And they think they're being cute by doing this because they want to break it. In other words, they asked the FBI, L. Patrick Gray, about the Ellsberg stuff, about the safe and everything else, and they were dragging their heels. And Gray couldn't get anything going because he was being undermined secretly by Mark Felt. So then when they went to Richard Helms said, "I'm not going to help you with these things." So they create the plumbers unit. And they now have a miniature FBI and a miniature CIA under their control, and they're giddy like kids. And this is what happened. This is the result of their childlike giddiness of creating this plumbers unit. It brought down the entire White House.
Which is really insane.
I know.
Because the whole thing was silly.
I know, but it was their own silliness. If they just were able to utilize the FBI, and they weren't getting any traction, but they really didn't need any traction. I mean, it was overkill, bro. When you've won a landslide victory with 49 states, do you really need to create your own CIA? I mean, you've got a CIA. I mean, it was just too much.
Well, it's kind of like the I keep saying the left doesn't quit. They never stop.
Yeah.
And in a way, they were spiking the football here, and then that just blew everything up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these things that they tried to do was amateur hour. I mean, you've got Liddy, who's ex-FBI. He's like a half crazy person. You've got Hunt, who's got like a checkered career. You've got this McCord, who's got his own problem. I mean, this is the guy you want to give all this money to, Liddy, to do all these things. He's in over his head, whether you like Gordon Liddy or not. It's not really relevant. It's too big for him. What they're trying to do, break into the Chilean embassy, break into Democratic headquarters. They just think this is like, 007 on steroids. It's way out of their league. It's way out of their league.
But it's fun.
Yeah.
Fun, Mark. And you could sort of see that, especially with that kind of money. I mean,
yeah, there was mad money. I mean, they were having lobster dinners at the Watergate. They were like, kids who have had super tight budgets their whole lives in all their G15 or G7 jobs, whatever the hell their G was, they had always had restraints on them. And look, here's Barker and his crew. They don't even want any money. We're in it for patriotism.
That's insane. It's insane. Well, okay, so we're going to continue with more Watergate coming soon.
Oh, yeah, to a theater near you. Yeah, we're going to get into, I don't know who we're going to do. I think we'll probably do Martinez next because he's affiliated with Barker. And then we'll get into Hunt. And Liddy we did already, so we don't have to do him.
Yeah, we got Liddy. We got Barker.
We're going to need some trading cards, Hunley. This is getting a little complicated.
Yeah, I got to put those together. Pamela Clifton's in here with $1. Thank you. Mary S. gifted a U.S. membership. Thank you very much. And Agitated Bison, Alabama Air Guard pilots killed in B-26 during Bull.
Bay of Pigs.
Bay of Pigs. Oh,
yeah. Interesting. Well, I'll tell you something. In between this whole thing, on May 16th, Bremer shoots Wallace. And there's the whole discussion about, by Chuck Colson and Buchanan and others as to whether Bremer's on the right or the left. And it's kind of a fear of Nixon that he is a Nixon supporter. He's not, he doesn't know. And he says to them, Colson suggests that they go to Bremer's house in Milwaukee, his apartment, and throw around some McGovern literature or Muskie literature as it was at the time. And they never really did it because the place had already been overrun by FBI, police, neighborhood people. Everyone had been into Bremer's thing. But the question is, where did that gun come from for Arthur Bremer? There was some rumors that it came from Liddy or Hunt.
Wow.
Hunt denies it. Hunt denies it in 2 books.
Oh, I'm sure he does deny it, but
well, the fact that it's in print, denying it, it shows you the gravitas of the event.
The accusation was out there for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely out there. I had heard the rumor, but I never knew it was that large of a rumor.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy. Well, we are going to be shifting over now to locals. Keep the conversation going there for our after party following the illustrious Oswald.
I got my panda bear.
You got the panda.
Yeah. It's a little smaller than the other bears, but maybe panda bears are smaller.
Well, panda's not a grizzly.
Right. No, it makes some logical sense. It's not that much smaller, but it's a little bit smaller than the other bears.
But it's still very satisfying.
Yes, it is very cuddly.
Right. Well, everybody, you can follow us on Locals, unstructured.locals.com. There's a link in the description. I hope you do consider going over there. Again, you can be a member for free. Now, if you are a paid supporter, though, you'll get a lot more benefits, including things like the Oswald scripted audio drama, which part 3 is finally out. It's been out now for about a week or so.
Let me tell you something. That AI sounds more like me than I do.
Yeah, well, I'm
the narrator, by the way, so it's kind of scary to hear yourself sound better than yourself.
All right, well, we're going to head over there and see everybody momentarily.
Oh, right on.